Everybody. So in the last video, we built a basic spell end to end, and now we're going to start talking about the features inside of the editor. So first we're going to talk about manual versus triggered spells. Now, not all automations are run on autopilot, doing work for you in the background. Think about the little tasks that you do each day that you start yourself. Maybe you have an idea for a new blog post or video, or a teammate asks you to rewrite or summarize or otherwise work with a document, or a whole bunch of other little things. These are manual workflows. You take some information and you perform work using that information. So we created this company compliance demo spell in the last video, and I want to jump into the editor to show you a little bit about what types of inputs you can add. So if I add a new input, first thing at the top here is the type. Now we use types to determine what can go into certain other steps. It wouldn't really make sense to say, let's say, generate an image to pass in a spreadsheet or a date. That's not really useful information for that model to use. So you can choose your types here, and as we saw in the last video as well, when you choose a type for an input, then that will help validate it a little bit, just make it a little bit easier to use when you're running that spell. And we have quite a few here. We can do plain text, which is probably the most common for just typing in something. We have URLs, email addresses, phone numbers, a couple more advanced ones, dates, numbers, and then we also have files. And we break files into 5 different parts: documents, spreadsheets, audio, image, and file or video. And that helps us to say if we want to convert the document to text, or if we want to do some work on a spreadsheet, like count the columns, or get the transcript out of the audio or image file or video file. So selecting your type, hopefully that's mostly self-explanatory, but then you add a label, ABC label, so that you can see which one you're adding info to when you run the spell. The description's helpful, especially if you're sharing the spell with teammates, to describe what the input's supposed to do, or maybe give some examples. And the placeholder is also a place where you can put examples. So, type my text here, ... And then hopefully that will give some context to whoever's running the spell. Now, there's a few other things. We use the dropdown with multi-select in the last video. Whenever you select dropdown, that just means that it'll use the same type for that dropdown, but you specify your options yourself, so that if you only have a few defined options for that input, then you can do that there. And if you have multiple inputs, then you can do that either with or without a dropdown. You saw with dropdown, it just means that you can select multiple options, but if you do it without a dropdown, that means that you can enter multiple ones as well. So lots that you can do here, a lot of configuration to do, and then you can just mark whether it's required or not for the spell to actually run. Now, you can also use manual spells in a couple different ways. So we used it directly from this Run tab, but you can also run it, I'm going to start with the schedule. So if I add a schedule, then it will run, let's say, every week or every day or every, however long you want to do, every 2 weeks. You can say whatever schedule you want there. You can also run it through the API for the developers listening in. There's 2 ways to use the API. We're going to have a longer video on each of these, by the way, in later videos. But just want to highlight that that's there. You can also run it in bulk. So if you had a spreadsheet, then you can say, run the spell for every row in the spreadsheet, and then it will do exactly that. And that's really useful for like email outbound campaigns, or if you are trying to do like a phone call outbound campaign. A lot of those will use bulk running as well. Now let's talk about triggered spells. Those, on the other hand, are spells which start when something happens in another service. So I'm going to go create a new spell really quick just to show you what it looks like. If I go to Add Start, I can click Trigger. So now I select which app I want to listen to events from. So in this case, we use, let's say Slack is a pretty common one. And once I select Slack, it'll prompt me to connect my account down here. But I can also just select the event. So when a new Slack message comes in, once I connect my account, I can say whether it's which channel it should be on, or whether it should listen to keywords. And then you can see that the outputs are populated for you. So the message, the thread ID, the channel name, the sender name, any information that's useful for doing some work with that Slack message is going to be shown here. You can also change it anytime, whenever you want. Just keep in mind that when you do that, the variables from the start step are going to disappear and you'll have to add them back. So if you've defined some inputs for manual spell and you change it to a trigger later on, then any variables from those inputs are going to disappear and you're going to need to modify the steps you put in later. Now you can't create a spell that is both manual and triggered, but what you can do is if you have a case like that where you want to use roughly the same flow for when a Slack message comes in and also be able to run it manually, you can just duplicate the spell. And so if I go back to the dashboard and I click on more options up here, I can just duplicate it right here. And then I could change this one to, say, be a triggered spell. So hopefully that explains a little bit about manual versus triggered spells. We're going to dive into a couple of each throughout some of the videos later on, but just want to make sure that that is clear because that's the first thing you're going to see when you get into the editor. All right, that's all for now. Don't forget that you can always ask us questions in our Slack community, and we also have in there announcements, and we can respond pretty fast to your questions. I'll see you in the next video.